My name is Daisy, a 56-year-old mother from Seattle with a story that changed my life forever. When my only son Thomas looked me in the eyes and said those devastating words after learning about my Alzheimer's diagnosis, something inside me broke. I never thought I'd hear, "Just die, I don't give a shit," from my own child. So I left without warning, starting over in Arizona. Then, a month later, he showed up at my door, broken and desperate. What happened next taught me about forgiveness in ways I never expected. If you're watching from somewhere where family relationships can be complicated too, go ahead and subscribe to join me on this journey of healing. Let me know in the comments where you're from. I'd love to hear your story too. Life before those terrible words was ordinary but comfortable. I'd been a widow for 8 years after losing my husband Mark to a sudden heart attack. The pain of his loss never fully disappeared, but I'd created a stable life for myself. For 30 years, I taught third grade at Lakeside Elementary, pouring my heart into my students while raising Thomas on my own. Thomas was always a good kid growing up. Smart, athletic, played baseball all through high school. I still remember driving him to every practice, sitting through games in all kinds of weather, cheering until my voice gave out. We were a team, just the two of us against the world after Mark died. I worked extra hours tutoring after school to help put Thomas through college. He studied business administration at Washington State and graduated with honors. I was so proud watching him walk across that stage in his cap and gown. He got a good job at a financial firm right after graduation and seemed to be thriving. 5 years ago, Thomas married Allison, a lovely dental hygienist he met through mutual friends. Their wedding was beautiful. Thomas looked so much like his father in his tuxedo that it brought tears to my eyes. Allison fit right into our small family, always making sure to include me in their lives, even as they built their own home together. 3 years ago, they blessed me with my grandson, Jacob. That little boy became the light of my life. I babysat him 2 days a week while Thomas and Allison worked, cherishing those grandmother moments I'd always dreamed about. Jacob has Thomas's eyes and his father's laugh, a beautiful continuation of our family. But things started changing about a year ago. Thomas got promoted to senior financial advisor at his firm. The new position came with more money, but also more stress and longer hours. Our weekly family dinners became monthly, then sporadic. When we did get together, Thomas was often distracted, checking his phone constantly for work emails. "Mom, you don't understand the pressure I'm under," he'd say, whenever I gently suggested he might be working too much. "These clients have millions invested with us. I can't just ignore them because it's Sunday." I tried to be understanding. After all, I wanted him to succeed, but I noticed the distance growing between us. Our conversations became shorter, more superficial. He'd ask about my day, but wouldn't really listen to the answer. Still, I never imagined what would happen when I got my diagnosis. The first signs were subtle. I'd forget where I placed my keys or walk into a room and forget why I'd gone there. Normal aging stuff, I thought. But then I started forgetting words mid-sentence, mixing up my grocery lists, and once I got disoriented driving home from the store I'd visited hundreds of times. Dr. Patterson ran several tests over a few weeks: blood work, cognitive assessments, and finally an MRI. When he called me back in to discuss the results, his face told me everything before he spoke. "I'm sorry, Daisy, it's early onset Alzheimer's." The words hit me like physical blows. Early onset Alzheimer's at 56. I'd seen what this disease did to people. My own mother had suffered from it in her 70s. I'd watched her disappear bit by bit until she no longer recognized me. And now, it would happen to me too, but even earlier. "How long?" I asked Dr. Patterson, my voice barely a whisper. "Everyone progresses differently," he explained gently. "With medication and proper care, many patients maintain good quality of life for several years. But you'll eventually need assistance with daily activities." I drove home in a daze, tears blurring the familiar streets. My mind raced with questions and fears. Who would take care of me? What would happen to my independence? How much would I remember before the disease took everything? But most of all, I wondered how to tell Thomas. Despite our recent distance, he was still my only child, my family. I needed him now more than ever. I decided to tell him face to face at our next family dinner, hoping that having Allison there might help cushion the blow. I never imagined his reaction would destroy everything between us. It was a Sunday evening in early June when I arrived at Thomas and Allison's suburban home for dinner. Their house was beautiful, a modern two-story with a manicured lawn and flower beds I'd helped Allison plant. As always, Jacob ran to the door when I arrived, throwing his little arms around my legs. "Grandma, I lost another tooth." He grinned up at me, showing the new gap in his smile. "My goodness, you'll be all gum soon." I laughed, scooping him up for a proper hug. His familiar weight in my arms steadied my nerves a little. Allison greeted me with a warm hug in the entryway. "Dinner's almost ready," she said. "Thomas is just finishing up some work email, but he promised to put the phone away during dinner." I nodded, trying to hide my disappointment. Even on family night, work came first. Thomas emerged from his home office a few minutes later, looking tired but smiling when he saw me. "Hey, Mom," he said, giving me a quick hug. "Glad you could make it." "I wouldn't miss it," I replied, studying his face. The lines around his eyes seemed deeper than before. Dinner started pleasantly enough. Allison had made lasagna my favorite, and Jacob entertained us with stories from preschool. I tried to focus on the conversation, but my mind kept returning to the news I needed to share. How do you tell your child you're dying by inches? After we finished eating and Jacob had been excused to play, I took a deep breath. This was the moment. "Thomas, Allison, I need to tell you something important." I began, my hands trembling slightly as I set down my water glass. They both looked at me, sudden concern crossing their faces. "I've been having some health issues lately," I continued, my voice surprisingly steady. "I've had several tests done, and the doctors have diagnosed me with early-onset Alzheimer's." The silence that followed felt endless. Allison gasped softly, her hand covering her mouth. Thomas froze, his expression shifting from surprise to disbelief. "That can't be right," he finally said, shaking his head. "You're too young. Get another opinion." "I already did," I said gently. "Two specialists confirmed it. The symptoms I've been having, the forgetfulness, the confusion, they're just the beginning." "But you seem fine," Thomas insisted, his voice rising slightly. "You drove here by yourself. You remember everything about Jacob." "That's how it starts," I explained. "Good days and bad days, but it will get worse. That's why I wanted to talk to you both now, while I can still make decisions about my future care." Thomas pushed his chair back abruptly, standing up. "This is ridiculous. They must have mixed up your tests with someone else's." Allison reached for his arm. "Thomas, sit down. Let's listen to what your mother has to say." But something had shifted in Thomas's expression. The denial gave way to something harder, colder. "Do you have any idea what this means?" he demanded, ignoring Allison. "Do you know how expensive memory care facilities are? We're still paying off student loans, the mortgage, Jacob's college fund." "Thomas!" Allison exclaimed, looking horrified. "No, she needs to understand what she's asking of us," he continued, his voice getting louder. "We can't afford to pay for that kind of care, Mom. And we don't have space here for you to move in. I work 60-hour weeks already. Am I supposed to quit my job to take care of you too?" Each word felt like a slap. I hadn't even asked him for anything yet. I just wanted to share my diagnosis, to have my son hold my hand and tell me we'd figure it out together. "I have some savings," I said quietly, "and my pension. I'm not asking you to. It's not enough," Thomas interrupted, now pacing the dining room. "Those places cost thousands per month. Your savings will be gone in a year, then what?" "We pay until we're bankrupt." "Thomas, stop it," Allison pleaded, tears in her eyes. "This isn't about money right now. Your mother just told us she's sick." But Thomas wasn't listening. Years of stress, of pressure, of trying to be perfect at work and at home seemed to explode out of him all at once. And I was the target. "You always do this, Mom," he said bitterly. "You always find a way to make everything about you to make me feel guilty for having my own life." The accusation was so unfair, so utterly contrary to everything I'd ever done as his mother, that I couldn't speak for a moment. "That's not true," I finally whispered. "I've always supported you, Thomas. I've never asked you for anything." "Until now," he shouted. "Until you drop this bomb about needing care for the rest of your life. Do you have any idea what this will do to us?" To Jacob, we were finally getting ahead financially, and now this. I stood up shakily, tears blinding me. "I didn't choose this, Thomas. I didn't want this to happen. Well, neither did I, he yelled, his face contorted with rage and fear. So what am I supposed to do, Mom? Just watch you lose your mind while our family falls apart trying to care for you. Thomas, that's enough, Allison cried, standing up between us. But Thomas was beyond reason now. He looked at me with eyes I didn't recognize. Cold, distant eyes that held no love. You know what? Just die. I don't give a shit, he spat. It would be easier for everyone. The room went silent. Even Thomas seemed shocked by his own words, his face draining of color. Allison stared at him in horror. In that moment, something broke inside me, something that could never be repaired. My own son had just wished me dead to my face. Without a word, I gathered my purse and walked to the door on legs that barely supported me. I could hear Allison calling my name, could hear the beginning of Thomas's stammered apology, but I couldn't stay another second. As I pulled out of their driveway, the last thing I saw in my rearview mirror was Jacob's little face pressed against the window, confused by the adult drama he'd witnessed. I wondered if that would be my last memory of my grandson. The drive home passed in a blur. My hands shook on the steering wheel as tears streamed down my face. Had I really heard those words from my own son's mouth? The boy I'd nursed through fevers, the teenager whose heart I'd helped mend after his first breakup. The man I'd sacrificed so much for, had he really told me to just die? I pulled into my driveway and sat in the dark car for long minutes, unable to summon the energy to go inside. My modest, two-bedroom house, once a place of comfort, now felt like a hollow reminder of my solitude. Mark had been gone 8 years, and now it seemed I'd lost Thomas too. Finally, I dragged myself inside and collapsed onto the sofa, not even bothering to turn on the lights. The silence of the house pressed in around me, broken only by my occasional sobs. I replayed Thomas's words over and over, each repetition cutting deeper. Just die, I don't give a shit. How could he say that to me? After everything we'd been through together, after every sacrifice I'd made, I didn't sleep that night. I sat in my darkened living room, surrounded by photos of happier times, Thomas's graduation, his wedding, Jacob's birth. Family moments that now felt like artifacts from another life entirely. When morning came, I tried calling Thomas. I told myself maybe he'd just been shocked that he'd had time to process the news and would apologize. But the call went straight to voicemail. I tried again an hour later with the same result. Finally, I sent a text. We need to talk about last night. Please call me. No response came. I called Allison mid-morning, desperate for some connection. Daisy, I'm so sorry. She answered immediately, her voice thick with emotion. What Thomas said was unforgivable. He didn't mean it. Then why isn't he telling me that? I asked. Her hesitation told me everything. He's struggling to face what he did. He went to work early. He's ashamed, but also still processing everything. I'm the one who's dying, Allison, I said, surprising myself with the bluntness. I needed my son's support, not his condemnation. I know, she whispered. Give him a little time. He'll come around. But something inside me had shifted during that sleepless night. A lifetime of putting others first, my students, my husband, my son, had led me here to this moment of utter abandonment when I needed support most. Over the next few days, I began to think more clearly about my situation. If Thomas couldn't handle my diagnosis now, how would he cope as my condition deteriorated? Would I become a burden he resented more with each passing day? Would I hear those terrible words again and again? I made an appointment with Dr. Patterson to discuss my prognosis in more detail. Realistically, what am I looking at? I asked him. He sighed, taking off his glasses. With early onset, the progression can be faster than with later onset Alzheimer's. You're still in the early stages now. You'll have good clarity most days with occasional memory issues. But within a year or two, you'll likely need regular help with daily activities. Within 3 to 5 years, you'll probably need full-time care. And if I'm alone, if I don't have family support, his expression softened with understanding. There are options, Daisy. Memory care facilities, assisted living with memory care units. They're expensive, yes, but there are also social services that can help. I nodded my mind, already calculating my assets. My house was nearly paid off. I had my teacher's pension and about $180,000 in retirement savings. It wasn't a fortune, but it was something. That night, I called my younger sister Susan in Tucson, Arizona. We'd always been close, though. The distance meant we only saw each other once or twice a year. She knew about my diagnosis. I'd called her the day after I received it, but I hadn't told her about Thomas's reaction. When I finally shared what had happened, her gasp was audible through the phone. "He said what to you?" she demanded, outraged. "Daisy, that's monstrous." He was shocked, I said, finding myself making excuses for him despite everything. "He's under a lot of pressure at work." "Stop it," Susan interrupted firmly. "Nothing excuses telling your mother to die. Nothing." Hearing someone else's indignation somehow gave me permission to acknowledge my own pain more fully. "I don't know what to do, Susan," I admitted. "I can't stay here now. Every time the phone doesn't ring every day, he doesn't reach out. It's like losing him all over again." "Then come here," she said immediately. "Frank and I have plenty of room. You could stay with us while you figure things out." I couldn't impose. It's not imposing. It's family taking care of family. That's what we're supposed to do. Her words hit home, a stark contrast to Thomas's reaction. Here was my sister offering help without hesitation, while my own son had wished me dead rather than deal with my illness. Over the next week, I made my decision. I would sell my house, move to Arizona to be near Susan, and use my resources to plan for my own care. I wouldn't wait for Thomas to come around, wouldn't make myself vulnerable to more rejection. I contacted a realtor who specialized in quick sales. The Seattle housing market was hot. She assured me we could list and sell within weeks. I began sorting through 3 decades of possessions, deciding what to keep and what to let go. Through it all, Thomas never called. I saw one text from him 3 days after our fight. "I'm sorry for what I said. I need some time." That was it. No visit, no real apology, no acknowledgement of the pain he'd caused. I wrote him a short note that I planned to leave on the kitchen counter when I departed. Thomas. By the time you read this, I will have moved to Tucson to be near Susan. I need to make arrangements for my care while I still can, and it's clear I can't depend on you for support. I don't blame you for being afraid. I'm afraid too. But I won't spend my remaining good years waiting for you to decide I'm worth your time. I've left my forwarding address with the realtor. If you ever want to reach me, you can. I will always love you despite everything. Mom. It was the hardest letter I'd ever written, but as I sealed it in an envelope with his name, I felt a strange sense of control returning. For the first time since my diagnosis, I was taking charge of my future, rather than waiting for someone else to determine it for me. My last act before leaving was to look at the photo albums one more time. I traced Thomas's face in his baby pictures, his school photos, his wedding portrait. Then I closed the album and packed it away. I couldn't erase the past, but I could choose my path forward. 2 weeks after Thomas told me to just die, I locked my house for the last time and began the drive to my new life. The journey from Seattle to Tucson took me 3 days. I could have made it in 2, but I deliberately took my time stopping at roadside attractions and scenic overlooks. This cross-country drive was more than just physical distance. It was me claiming independence while I still could. As I drove through Oregon, Northern California, and eventually into the Nevada desert, memories flooded back unexpectedly. A rest stop in Redding where we'd picnicked during a family vacation when Thomas was 10. The Grand Canyon side trip we'd taken when dropping him off at college. All these landmarks of our life together now felt bittersweet. I tried not to think about what I was leaving behind: my house, my friends, my familiar grocery store and coffee shop. Instead, I focused on the road ahead, literally and figuratively. The landscapes changed dramatically from the lush greenery of the Pacific Northwest to the stark beauty of the desert. By the time I crossed into Arizona, I felt different too, lighter somehow, as if I'd shed a skin I no longer needed. Susan and her husband Frank were waiting on their front porch when I pulled into their driveway in Tucson. The moment I stepped out of my car, exhausted but relieved to have arrived safely, Susan enveloped me in a hug that felt like coming home. "You made it," she whispered, holding me tight. "I made it." I agreed, and we both knew I meant more than just the drive. Frank, ever practical, began unloading my car. "We've got the guest room all set up for you, Daisy. You can stay as long as you need." Their home was modest but comfortable, a single-story ranch house with a beautiful desert garden in the backyard. The guest room was cool and welcoming, with windows overlooking a small courtyard filled with cacti and desert flowers. "It's perfect," I told them, sitting on the edge of the bed. "I can't thank you both enough." "Family takes care of family," Susan repeated her mantra, sitting beside me. "We're going to help you figure this out one day at a time." Those first few weeks were a blur of activity. Susan helped me research apartments nearby, while Frank drove me to doctor appointments to establish care with new specialists. I found a small Alzheimer's support group that met weekly at a local community center and began attending immediately. The people in the group became my lifeline. Some were in earlier stages like me, others more advanced, but still able to participate. Some came with caregivers, others alone. All understood what I was facing in a way even Susan couldn't. Martha, a former librarian about my age, became a particular friend. She'd been diagnosed 2 years earlier and had already navigated many of the challenges I was just beginning to face. "The trick," she told me one day as we had coffee after a meeting, "is to live fully now while making plans for later. Don't let the future steal today." I took her words to heart. I found a small, one-bedroom apartment just 10 minutes from Susan's house in a complex with a manager who knew about my condition and promised to keep an eye out for me. I furnished it simply with a few pieces I'd brought from Seattle and some new items Susan helped me pick out. I started volunteering at the local library 2 mornings a week, helping with children's story time. The familiar rhythm of reading to children brought me joy, even as I sometimes struggled to remember certain words or lost my place in the story. The children never seemed to mind. Dr. Lopez, my new neurologist, started me on medication that helped manage some of my symptoms. "It won't stop the progression," he explained, "but it may slow it and help you function better day to day." Throughout all of this, I thought of Thomas constantly. I wondered if he'd found my note yet, if he'd even noticed I was gone. Had he tried to call my old number? Had he driven by the house and seen the "for sale" sign? I hadn't given him my new phone number or address, directly a small act of self-protection. If he wanted to find me, he would have to make at least a minimal effort by contacting the realtor. At night, alone in my new apartment, I'd look at photos of Jacob on my phone. He was growing so fast. Was he asking about me? Did Thomas and Allison tell him where I'd gone? These questions haunted me, but I pushed them aside during daylight hours, focusing instead on building my new life. There were good days when I felt almost normal, when I could drive to the store without getting confused, when I remembered everyone's names at the support group. There were also bad days when the fog descended, when I put my keys in the refrigerator when I started making breakfast, only to forget what I was doing halfway through. On those bad days, I'd call Susan and she'd come over to sit with me, never judging, never rushing me. We'd look through old family photos together and I'd tell her stories from our childhood, desperate to hold on to those memories before they slipped away. "Remember when Dad built us that treehouse?" I asked her once, clutching an old photo. "And you fell and broke your arm the very first day." Susan laughed. "I was showing off, trying to climb to the top branch. Mom was so mad at Dad for making it too tall." These moments of shared memory became precious to me, anchors to a past that I feared would eventually dissolve into nothing. One month after arriving in Tucson, I was arranging books on my small bookshelf when my phone rang. I didn't recognize the number, but answered anyway. "Daisy? It's Allison." My heart stopped for a moment. Allison, Thomas's wife, my daughter-in-law. "Allison," I said, my voice barely audible. "How are you?" We're... Daisy, Thomas has been looking everywhere for you," she said, her voice breaking. "He went to your house last week and found it up for sale. The neighbors said you'd left. He's been frantic." A complex mix of emotions washed through me: satisfaction that he'd finally tried to find me, anger that it had taken so long, hope that maybe he wanted to make amends. "I left a note," I said carefully, "with my forwarding address. The realtor has it." "He never got any note, Daisy. He's been calling hospitals, police stations, even morgues," Allison continued. "He thought something had happened to you." My mind raced. Had the note fallen? Had someone taken it? Or had Thomas simply not noticed it in his hurry? "I've been in Tucson for a month," I explained. "I'm staying near my sister Susan." There was a pause. I could hear Allison covering the phone, speaking to someone else. Then Thomas's voice came through, raw and desperate. Mom, is that really you?" Despite everything, hearing his voice made tears spring to my eyes. Yes, Thomas, it's me. Where have you been? Why did you just disappear? I've been going out of my mind with worry. The accusatory tone in his voice sparked a flash of anger in me. I told you where I was going in my note, and frankly, after what you said to me, I'm surprised you even noticed I was gone. He was silent for a moment. I never found any note, Mom, and I've been trying to apologize for weeks. I kept calling your old number. I went by the house several times, but you never answered. I hadn't given him my new number, I realized, and I'd changed my email address too, setting up a new account with my new name situation. I sold the house, I said flatly. I moved to be near Susan. I needed to make arrangements for my future since it was clear I couldn't count on you. Mom, please, he said, his voice cracking. What I said that night, it was unforgivable. I know that. I was shocked and scared, and I lashed out in the worst possible way. But you have to believe me, I didn't mean it. I closed my eyes, remembering the cold look in his eyes when he'd told me to just die. It sure seemed like you meant it at the time, I said quietly. I found your diagnosis papers, he continued. After you left that night, Allison made me sleep on the couch, and the next morning she told me I had to make things right. I came to your house to apologize in person, but you wouldn't answer the door. I remembered ignoring the doorbell that day, too, hurt to face him. I went back a few days later, and that's when I found your medical papers on the kitchen counter. I read everything, Mom. The prognosis, the treatment options. I had no idea. I've been researching Alzheimer's ever since, trying to understand what you're facing. His voice broke completely. Please, Mom, tell me where you are. Let me come see you. Let me try to make this right. I hesitated, torn between self-protection and the longing to reconnect with my only child. I don't know if this can be fixed, Thomas, I said honestly. What you said cut me to the core. I know, he whispered, and I'll spend the rest of my life trying to make it up to you if you'll let me. Jacob asks about you every day. He doesn't understand why Grandma disappeared. The mention of Jacob pierced my heart. My innocent grandson caught in the middle of adult pain. Allison came back on the phone. Daisy, he's been in therapy since you left. He's not sleeping, barely eating. What he said was terrible, but he loves you. We all do. Please give him a chance to show you. I took a deep breath, making my decision. I'm in an apartment near Susan's house in Tucson, I said finally. If you want to come here, we can talk. I'm not promising anything, but I'll listen. The relief in Allison's voice was palpable. Thank you, Daisy. Thank you. We'll get the address from you, and Thomas will be there as soon as possible. After I hung up, I sat staring at the phone for a long time. Was I making a mistake? Would seeing Thomas only reopen wounds that had barely begun to heal? Or was this the beginning of reconciliation? I called Susan to tell her about the conversation. Are you sure about this? She asked, protective as always. He hurt you deeply, Daisy. I'm not sure of anything, I admitted, but he's still my son, and I need to at least hear what he has to say. The next day, I cleaned my small apartment, obsessively arranging and rearranging the few photos I'd displayed. I debated what to wear, what to serve if he stayed long enough for a meal, what to say when I first saw him. That night, I barely slept, playing out different scenarios in my mind. Would he apologize properly? Would he make excuses? Would he expect me to simply forget what had happened? More importantly, could I forgive him even if he asked? Some wounds cut too deep for simple healing. Susan called early the next morning. Frank and I can be there when he arrives if you want, she offered. Moral support. No, I decided. This needs to be between Thomas and me, but thank you. By noon, my nerves were stretched to breaking. Thomas had texted that his flight would land at 1:30 and he'd take a taxi directly to my apartment. Every car sound outside made me jump. At 2:45, the doorbell rang. I took a deep breath, smoothed my shirt, and opened the door to face my son for the first time since he'd told me to die. There he stood, my only child, looking like he'd aged 10 years in a month. Thomas's face was gaunt, with dark circles under his eyes. His usually neat hair was disheveled, and his shoulders sagged with exhaustion. He clutched a small overnight bag in one hand, his knuckles white from the tight grip. For a long moment, we just stared at each other across the threshold, neither knowing quite what to say. Then Thomas broke the silence, his voice hoarse. "Mom," he whispered, his eyes filling with tears. "You're really here." I stepped back, gesturing him inside without a word. My apartment felt suddenly smaller with his presence. He stood awkwardly in the middle of my living room, looking around at my new space. "It's nice," he said, clearly struggling for words. "Bright," I nodded, maintaining my distance. "The sun helps. Less rain than Seattle." More uncomfortable silence. I could see him gathering courage, his chest rising with a deep breath. "Mom, I am so sorry," he finally said, setting down his bag and taking a hesitant step toward me. "What I said to you that night, it was unforgivable. I don't even know where those words came from. I've been sick about it ever since." The rawness in his voice touched something in me, but I stayed firm. "They came from somewhere, Thomas. People don't say things like that without some truth behind them." He flinched as if I'd slapped him. "No, that's not—" I was shocked, Mom, terrified. Dad died so suddenly, and now to hear that you have Alzheimer's, I just couldn't process it. I lashed out in the worst possible way. "You told me to die," I said flatly, needing to say the words out loud. "Your own mother, after I told you I had a terminal illness." Thomas's face crumpled. He sank down onto my sofa, burying his face in his hands. His shoulders began to shake with silent sobs. Despite everything, my maternal instinct urged me to comfort him, but I held back. I needed to hear him out completely. "I know," he said, his voice muffled by his hands. "God, I know. I've replayed that moment 1,000 times. I'd give anything to take it back." He looked up at me, his face streaked with tears. "I've been in therapy twice a week since you left, trying to understand why I reacted so horribly." This surprised me. Thomas had always dismissed therapy as not for people like us. That he'd sought help showed how deeply affected he'd been. "And what did you learn?" I asked, sitting in the armchair across from him. He wiped his eyes, struggling to compose himself. "That I never properly dealt with Dad's death. I just pushed it down, focused on schoolwork, building my own family. But underneath, I've been terrified of losing you too. When you said Alzheimer's, all I could think was that I was going to watch you disappear piece by piece. So your solution was to wish me dead immediately." The bitterness in my voice was unmistakable. "No," he exclaimed. "God, no. I don't want you to die, Mom. I was just— the financial stress, the burden of care, it all hit me at once. But that's no excuse. There is no excuse." I watched him carefully, looking for signs of the genuine remorse Allison had described. It was there, in every line of his body, every crack in his voice. "I found your medical papers after you left," he continued. "I read everything. I've been researching Alzheimer's nonstop, calling specialists, learning about treatment options and care facilities." He reached for his bag, pulling out a thick folder. "I've put together information on the best memory care centers in both Seattle and Tucson. I've talked to financial advisors about how to maximize your pension and savings to cover costs. I've even looked into moving our family to Arizona to be near you." The thoroughness of his research took me by surprise. This wasn't a hastily planned apology trip. He'd been working on this for weeks. "Thomas," I said carefully, "I appreciate the effort, but arranging my care isn't the issue here. The issue is that when I needed my son's emotional support the most, you rejected me in the cruelest possible way." He nodded, accepting the rebuke. "You're right, and I can't change that moment no matter how much I wish I could. All I can do is try to be the son you deserve from this point forward, if you'll give me that chance." I stood up, needing space to think. I walked to the window, looking out at the unfamiliar desert landscape that had become my new home. Thomas waited silently, giving me time. "Jacob asks about you every day," he said softly after a while. "He doesn't understand where his grandma went. Allison and I didn't know what to tell him." The mention of my grandson pierced my heart again. "And what did you tell him?" "That Grandma moved to a new house far away, but that doesn't mean she doesn't love him," Thomas replied. "He drew you pictures. They're in my bag." I turned back to face him. "Why didn't you call me sooner, Thomas?" "It's been a month." His expression clouded with shame. "I tried Mom. I called your old number dozens of times. I went to your house repeatedly. When I realized you'd moved without telling me, I panicked. I thought maybe you'd fallen, been hospitalized. I called every hospital in Seattle. I left a note, I insisted, with my forwarding address. Thomas shook his head. I never found it, I swear. When I saw the for sale sign, I tracked down your realtor, but she wouldn't give me your new contact information without your permission. It was only when Allison thought to check your old Facebook friends list and found Aunt Susan that we had any lead at all. Could I have forgotten to leave the note? With my condition, it was possible. But I remembered writing it, sealing it, placing it on the counter. Thomas, I said, changing the subject. I need to know something. If I let you back into my life, what happens when things get hard, when I start forgetting your name, when I need help bathing or eating? Will you tell me to just die again because it would be easier? The question hung in the air between us. Thomas looked stricken. No, he said with quiet intensity. Never again. That's why I've been in therapy, to understand why I reacted from fear instead of love, to make sure I never do that again. He stood up, approaching me cautiously. Mom, I've taken family leave from work. 6 weeks. I'm here for as long as you'll have me. To help you get settled, to connect you with doctors, to spend time with you while, he faltered, while you're still you. The simplicity of his last statement broke through my defenses. While I'm still me, because eventually I wouldn't be. The Alzheimer's would take that away too. Allison and Jacob will fly out next weekend if you're comfortable with that, he added. Jacob made me promise to bring his grandma home, but I told him that's your decision, not mine. I felt tears welling in my eyes for the first time since he'd arrived. I'm not coming back to Seattle, Thomas. I've started over here. I have my support group, my Dr. Susan, nearby. I know, he said quickly. I meant bring you home emotionally, back into our family. We'll come to you, Mom. We'll figure it out together. He took another tentative step toward me. I'm not asking for instant forgiveness. I know I don't deserve that. I'm just asking for a chance to show you that I can be the son you need during this time. Looking at him, truly. Looking at him, I could see both the man he'd become and the little boy I'd raised. I remembered holding his hand on his first day of kindergarten, teaching him to ride a bike, bandaging his scraped knees. I remembered his face when he saw Jacob for the first time, full of wonder and love. People make terrible mistakes when they're afraid. I'd seen it countless times in my years of teaching fear, bringing out the worst in otherwise good people. The question was whether this terrible mistake defined our relationship going forward or whether we could build something new from the ashes. I'm still angry, I told him honestly, and hurt. That won't disappear overnight. I know. He nodded, accepting this. And I need you to understand something important, I continued. I'm going to make my own decisions about my care for as long as I possibly can. I won't be pushed aside or treated like a child. Absolutely, he agreed. Whatever you decide, I'll support. I just want to be part of your life again, however you'll have me. I studied his face, looking for any sign of insincerity, but found only desperate hope and profound regret. We can start with dinner, I finally said. There's a decent restaurant down the street. You can tell me how you've really been, and I can tell you about my support group. Small steps, Thomas. That's all I can offer right now. The relief on his face was immediate and overwhelming. Small steps, he repeated. That's more than I dared hope for. As I gathered my purse and keys, I noticed my hands were steadier than they'd been in weeks. I couldn't predict the future, how quickly my disease would progress, whether Thomas and I could truly rebuild our relationship, what life would look like a year from now. But for the first time, since hearing those devastating words, I felt a small spark of hope. Whatever came next, I wouldn't face it alone. 6 months passed surprisingly quickly. The Arizona summer gave way to fall, bringing milder temperatures that allowed for longer walks in the desert landscapes I'd grown to love. My life had found a new rhythm, different from what I'd imagined, but fulfilling in unexpected ways. True to his word, Thomas had stayed in Tucson for his entire 6 weeks of family leave. He found a small rental apartment near mine, giving me the space I needed while remaining close enough for daily visits. Our relationship rebuilt itself slowly, carefully, like a fractured bone that needed time to knit back together properly. Those first few dinners together were awkward, filled with careful conversation and the conscious avoidance of painful topics. But Gradually, as days turned into weeks, we began to find our way back to something resembling comfort in each other's presence. Allison and Jacob flew out that first weekend as planned. Seeing my grandson after such a long absence was both joyful and bittersweet. At 3, Jacob had already grown noticeably in the months we'd been apart. He was shy with me, at first hiding behind Allison's legs and peeking out cautiously. "Grandma looks different," he whispered loudly to his mother, making us all laugh despite the tension. "It's my hair," I explained, touching the shorter style I'd adopted since moving. "And we're in a new place, but I'm still your Grandma Daisy." By the end of their 3-day visit, Jacob was back to his old self with me demanding stories and showing me his newest toy cars. Watching him play in my small living room, I realized how much I'd missed in my hasty departure from Seattle. Never again, I promised myself. Whatever happened with Thomas, I wouldn't lose my connection to Jacob. After Thomas returned to work in Seattle, we established a new pattern. He called every other day just to check in. We started with short conversations, updates about the weather, Jacob's preschool adventures, my latest doctor's appointment. Over time, these calls deepened into more meaningful exchanges. "I had a bad day yesterday," I admitted during one evening call in late October. "I got lost walking home from the library, a place I've gone a dozen times." Instead of panic or platitudes, Thomas responded with simple understanding. "That sounds scary, Mom. What happened?" I explained how a kind stranger had helped me find my way and how I'd immediately called Susan afterward. "I'm going to start using that smartphone app you recommended," I told him, "the one with GPS tracking." "Good idea," he said, "and maybe we should look into one of those medical alert pendants just for extra security." What struck me most was his tone, not commanding or fearful, but matter-of-fact and supportive. He was respecting my autonomy while offering practical help. It was exactly what I needed. Thomas, Allison, and Jacob now visited once a month, staying in a hotel nearby. These visits became the anchors in my calendar events I looked forward to, with growing anticipation. We explored Tucson together, visited the Desert Museum, took Jacob swimming in the hotel pool. Normal family activities that felt precious because of what we'd almost lost. My medical care had stabilized too, Doctor. Lopez adjusted my medications until we found the combination that best managed my symptoms. I had good days and bad days, but the good still outnumbered the bad. My support group remained vital to my emotional well-being, a place where I could speak openly about my fears without the burden of protecting my loved ones' feelings. Martha, from my support group, became a close friend. At 61, she was 5 years into her diagnosis and still living independently with help from her daughter. She showed me it was possible to maintain dignity and purpose even as the disease progressed. "The secret," she told me during one of our coffee dates, "is to accept help before you desperately need it. That way, it's on your terms." I took her advice to heart, allowing Susan to drive me to appointments when my concentration wasn't good, accepting Thomas's offer to set up automatic bill payments, letting Allison organize my medications during their visits. Thomas continued his own therapy in Seattle, occasionally sharing insights from his sessions during our calls. "I realize that something important this week," he told me one evening. "When Dad died so suddenly, I never got to say goodbye. I think when you told me about your diagnosis, part of me wanted to run away because I couldn't bear the thought of a long goodbye." His honesty touched me deeply. "This disease is teaching me that there are many kinds of goodbyes," I replied. "Some happen in an instant, others over years. But we get to choose what we do with the time in between." During their November visit, Thomas brought up the subject of future care more directly. We were sitting on my small patio watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of purple and gold. Jacob was already asleep in my bedroom after an exhausting day at the zoo. "I've been researching memory care facilities here in Tucson," Thomas said carefully. "There's one about 20 minutes from your apartment that has an excellent reputation. They offer different levels of care, so you could start with minimal assistance and increase as needed." In the past, such a conversation might have felt intrusive, like he was trying to manage my life, but the months of rebuilding trust had changed the dynamic between us. "I've actually toured that one," I told him. "Martha's daughter recommended it. It's nice, but expensive." "Money isn't the issue, Mom," Thomas said firmly. Between your pension savings and what we can contribute, we'll make it work. What matters is finding a place where you feel comfortable and respected. I'm not ready yet, I said, but I appreciate knowing the options. He nodded, understanding without pressing further. Whenever you're ready, we'll handle it together. That night, after they'd gone back to their hotel, I sat alone in my living room thinking about how far we'd come. The wound Thomas's cruel words had inflicted would never completely heal. Some hurts go too deep for that. But we'd found a way forward, a path that acknowledged the pain while refusing to let it define our relationship. In December, we faced a decision about the holidays. Thomas wanted me to fly to Seattle for Christmas, but the idea of navigating a busy airport during my occasional confusion episodes filled me with anxiety. How about you all come here instead? I suggested during our weekly video call. Susan and Frank would love to have everyone for Christmas dinner. Thomas and Allison exchanged glances. Actually, Allison said hesitantly, we've been talking about something bigger. What would you think if we moved to Tucson permanently? The question caught me completely off guard. Move here, but your jobs. Jacob's school. I can transfer to my firm's Phoenix office, Thomas explained. It's a bit of a commute, but doable. Allison has already looked into dental practices hiring in Tucson, and Jacob's young enough that changing schools won't be traumatic. But your whole life is in Seattle, I protested, even as hope fluttered in my chest. Mom, Thomas said gently, you're our family. Where you are is where our life should be. We want to be here for all of it, the good days and the hard ones. I couldn't speak for a moment, overwhelmed by what they were offering. Think about it, Allison added. We don't need an answer right now, but we wanted you to know we're serious about being here for you, not just for visits. By Christmas, they'd made their decision regardless of my hesitation. Thomas accepted the transfer, and they put their Seattle house on the market. By February, they'd found a home in Tucson just 15 minutes from my apartment and Susan's house. Watching them unpack on moving day, seeing Jacob explore his new backyard with its small swimming pool, I felt a complex mix of emotions, gratitude for their sacrifice, lingering sadness about the circumstances that brought us here, and a deep, abiding love that had weathered the worst storm of our relationship. Are you sure about all this? I asked Thomas as we sat on his new patio watching Allison and Jacob splash in the pool. More sure than I've been about anything in a long time, he said, reaching for my hand. We needed this fresh start, Mom. All of us. Now, 6 months after Thomas had appeared at my door, broken and desperate, we'd created a new normal. I still lived independently in my apartment, but with family nearby for regular dinners, weekend outings, and immediate help if needed. We'd established a delicate balance between my autonomy and my growing need for support. My disease continued its inexorable progression. I had more bad days now. Days when names slipped away, when familiar tasks became puzzling, when the fog descended without warning. But I also had a support system I could trust, people who would protect my dignity, even as my capacities diminished. One evening in late March, Thomas came over for our weekly dinner alone. After we'd eaten, he handed me a legal folder. What's this? I asked, opening it cautiously. The paperwork we discussed, he explained. Medical power of attorney, advanced directives, all of it. Filled out exactly as you specified, with Susan as your primary decision-maker and me as backup. I leafed through the documents, seeing all my wishes spelled out clearly: when to transition to full-time care, what interventions I wanted and didn't want, as the disease advanced, even funeral arrangements for when the time eventually came. You listed yourself as backup, I noted, surprised. Not primary. Thomas nodded. You and I talked about this. Remember, you wanted Susan to make the hard calls because she'll follow your wishes exactly. You were worried I might push for more intervention than you want because I wouldn't be ready to let go. The fact that he remembered this conversation honored my choice, even though it must have hurt, told me everything about how much he'd grown. Thank you, I said, signing the papers with a hand that shook only slightly, for respecting my decisions. He helped me organize the documents, explaining which copies went where. I've scheduled an appointment with the elder law attorney next week to finalize everything, he added. I'll drive you. As he was leaving that night, I stopped him at the door. Thomas, I need to tell you something. He turned, his expression concerned. What is it, Mom? I forgive you, I said simply. For what you said that night, I truly forgive you." His eyes filled with tears. "I don't deserve it." "Maybe not," I agreed. "But forgiveness isn't about deserving. It's about choosing not to let pain define us, and I'm choosing to remember all the ways you've shown up for me these past 6 months, not just the one terrible moment when you didn't." He hugged me, then holding me with the gentle care one might show a precious, fragile thing. In a way, that's what our relationship had become, something valuable that had been broken and carefully mended stronger in some places, forever changed but whole again in the ways that mattered most. Later that night, as I prepared for bed, I caught sight of my reflection in the bathroom mirror. My face showed the subtle changes of my disease, a certain vagueness in the eyes, sometimes a hesitancy in expression. But I also saw strength there, a resilience I hadn't known I possessed until I'd been forced to find it. The journey ahead would not be easy. There would come a day when I might not recognize Thomas or Jacob, when my independence would be a memory, when the woman in the mirror would be a stranger to me. But until that day came, I would live fully in each moment I was granted, surrounded by the family who had proven when tested that love could overcome even the cruelest words spoken in fear. Taking control of my own life after Thomas's rejection had been the hardest thing I'd ever done. But that single act of courage had ultimately given us both the chance to heal, to grow, and to face my uncertain future together, rather than apart. Some lessons come at a terrible price, but if sharing my story helps even one person find the strength to set boundaries, to demand respect in their most vulnerable moments, to forgive without forgetting, then perhaps those harsh words, "just die, I don't give a shit," will have served a purpose beyond the pain they caused. Have you ever had to forgive words that cut straight to your soul, or found yourself saying something unforgivable to someone you love? I'd appreciate hearing your stories in the comments below. And if this journey of healing and second chances touched something in you, please consider subscribing and sharing with others who might need to hear that even our deepest wounds can become pathways to unexpected grace. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember, it's never too late to choose love over fear, connection over isolation, forgiveness over bitterness. Until next time, take care of yourselves and each other.